Welcome to See-Through Panel number 3, a podcast where we talk about anything related to graphic novels. Today we're going to be talking about Ascent by Jed Mercurio and Wesley Robbins. My name is Cole Harvey. I am with Fahad Rahman.
Hello, everyone.
And Fahad, I guess if you want to start off, let's do this.
Sure. So the creators are Jed Mercurio. Jed trains as a doctor. While at medical school, he received extensive flying training with the RAF, which feeds, I think, quite a lot into the details that go into the book. He is a British television writer, director, and novelist. His TV credits include the critically acclaimed Cardiac Arrest, Line of Duty, and Critical. And he also wrote the BBC Netflix drama, The Bodyguard. Wesley Robbins is an illustrator and designer based in London. He graduated from Kingston University with a BA in illustration and animation. Ascent is his first graphic novel, published in 2011 by Jonathan Cape. He's an award-winning children's book illustrator and has worked extensively with BPE International Limited on their Cardigan range, creating the Journey Buddy series and a set of cards for Clintons as well.
So not a lot of past graphic novel work. I wasn't aware of that.
No, I think from what I had a look on his website, and a lot of his portfolio seems to be children's illustration and work with companies like Clintons on kind of kiddish art. I would say kind of art aimed at an audience that's younger rather than kind of the graphic novel format. Because this book certainly shouldn't be read by young children.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, this book is about a fighter pilot during the Cold War. I think we open with him as a kid in Stalingrad, 1946. Yep. And so he's an orphan. He gets taken in to, I guess, just an orphanage around a destroyed town, the destroyed area of Stalingrad. And then, I mean, it progresses from there. That's like the thing that amazed me is that's the only really in-depth look at the main character. You don't get a lot of his, you don't have a lot to connect with. I don't know if that's coming across right. He's definitely a complex character, but he's not, you don't know him personally, super personally.
Yes, I think that's actually quite interesting you said that, because I was reading through some of the reviews so this is an adaptation of a novel written by Jed Mercurio, and one of the criticisms of the novel was that the character, there wasn't a lot of meat there. The novel, I haven't read the novel, but some of the criticisms around it is around that a lot of it's around the technical description of what they call him Ivan the Terrible, and to do to survive later on in the mission. I think a lot of it, I think there is a quite a strong character there, and it's kind of told a lot through his actions, rather than the backstories. Ivan, what is the character's actual name?
Yevgeny Yeremin. That's a big try. That's not can't be right, but I'm trying. Yeah, I think I would agree with you there. I don't think I would agree that he's not a character you can connect with. Like, I think he's definitely a well-rounded character, but it's not in the typical way where you're getting a lot of his dialogue, his inner thoughts. He's got one goal through, I think, pretty much through the whole book, and that's just for people to know his name. And he's not. I wouldn't say he's terribly complex, but he's definitely compelling.
He's very compelling. He's bloody-minded and stubborn to the point of self-destruction.
And he's not... Sorry, go on.
You go ahead.
Like, the whole time I was reading it, I was never like, this guy's a bad guy. But then after, I was like, wait, that guy was a really bad guy. Like, he did a lot of killing. He did a lot of killing, and he didn't really... That was never what he was thinking about. Like, if he was killing people, I mean, I guess that's a little disconnected because you're in a plane, but... He was never like, I just killed a guy. He was like, my numbers are up, basically.
Yes. I hadn't actually thought about it like that, actually. That's quite an interesting point. Yeah.
I was starting to think he was a villain almost, but he's not. He's not a villain.
Yeah, so he's raised in the aftermath of World War II. Russia's basically torn to pieces. And one of the most haunting images in the entire book comes kind of quite early, where he's being raised in an orphanage, and in order to kind of get into the space camp, he basically blinds another child, and it's kind of coming out this place of desperation, the need to survive, and that kind of runs through his character, I think, and demonstrated repeatedly that he's going to do whatever he feels that he has to kind of achieve the goals that he set himself to.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that kid was a dick, right?
That kid was a dick, but
it's pretty bad. Yeah.
Yes, a level of kind of vicious. I mean, he had to do what he had to do to kind of get out of that orphanage, really. So yeah, it was. I was just like, "Ow, man, that looks." You see, certain images stay with you, and I can't stop thinking about kind of him just jamming his thumb inside that poor child's eye. It was just like, oh.
And the art's not terribly realistic, but you can feel that. It is.
Yeah.
It is. His eye just explodes. It looks like I wasn't even know. I thought maybe the kid would be dead because first he hits him in the back of the head with a rock.
Yes.
And then he just pops his eye, and I was like, oh my god, these are like I assume like 12-year-olds or something.
I thought they're slightly younger than that, maybe. Yeah, maybe 12, 11, something like that. Yeah, it was.
I guess there's no way to know. I'm looking for evidence of that, but I don't see much.
Yeah, I don't think they say what. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe he's it's 12, 13.
Either way, too young to be doing that.
Yeah.
So then we skip forward to Korea, and he is enlisting as a fighter pilot.
Yes.
I can't remember the exact circumstances, but the Soviet Air Force wasn't supposed to be in Korea, so they were flying without flags, basically. They're flying without any branding to let people know that they're Soviets.
Yeah, I mean, I did study the Korean War at school, but not much of it comes to mind. I do know that it was one of those proxy wars where the Soviets were basically funneling lots of arms and weapons, things like that to the North Koreans. Yeah, I think it was kind of one of those things. It's kind of, I want to say it's sort of analogous to the situation in Syria, where obviously the Syria or many of these other wars around the world where kind of like the Russians kind of providing weapons and munitions to force, but we're not actually there. We're not providing soldiers. We're just providing, weapons and expertise and other things to help our ally. But yeah, they he's there, but he's not really recognized as being there, which is, I think, a theme that runs all the way through the book as well.
I think that's the start of where he wants glory because he knows he's not going to get any for this, but he just feels like he earns it.
Yes.
That's kind of his main goal through the whole thing is to have his name known by his country or by the world, yes. I guess.
Yeah, and there's kind of an ultra competitive edge to him as well in terms of not only does he want the world to know, but he has to be better than anyone else near him. Kind of, it's not enough for him to be. I mean, he's done brilliant. He's got his way out of that terrible situation he was in growing up. He's in Korea. He's in this Air Force squadron. That for most people would be kind of like enough, but he's in a drive is kind of like not only am I here, but I have to be the best ace in my unit as well.
Yeah, and then eventually he wants to be the best like in the country. Like he's basically like a competitive sport. He's keeping track of who's on top globally and who's the most famous fighter pilot.
And you really do get the feeling that he's quite upset. I don't know who's narrating the book, whether it's him or whether it's maybe just, a third person, but you do get the idea that, Ivan the Terrible, Yevgeny, is really annoyed by the fact that the American fighter races are getting their names in newspapers and they're really rich. Well, not rich, but they're kind of famous, and him and his friends are kind of coming out here and getting twice as many kills, but no one knows their names, and no one's ever going to know their names because they're not supposed to be there.
That's kind of just like wrong place, wrong time. Like if he would have been born American, he would have been like the biggest fighter pilot of all time, right? But because he has these circumstances, I think that probably just like makes him double down on his goals, just all double my kill count basically. Yes. And in Korea, we basically just get he gets more and more kills. He gets the respect of his peers. He falls in. I don't know if he falls in love. That's another thing. There's a widow at his military base who eventually he will go on to marry. And I always thought, that was just like a woman he would spend time with when he wasn't in the plane. I didn't really feel anything like human love in that relationship, especially towards the end. We'll get there. But I don't think that was even one of his top priorities at any point, even after they have a family, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, not a lot of, I mean, there are a couple of romantic moments, but there are a couple of moments in the book where they do kind of build these hints of a deeper relationship, but there's not kind of, throughout the book, it's the story of basically him. Other characters don't tend to matter that much, and he doesn't if there's a weakness to the book, you don't really get an insight into kind of his personal relationships with other people. It's kind of, I wouldn't say surface level, but it's kind of almost surface level.
I feel as if it's on purpose, though. I don't think he was he accidentally just didn't add that stuff in. I think it is a purposeful lack of it, just to show that his priorities lie elsewhere.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
So eventually in Korea, what basically ends up happening is he chases I believe it was an American plane across across a border he wasn't supposed to cross, and that essentially anything past that point, it would be considered a war crime. And he crashes with a hammer and sickle painted on his plane, and that just seals the deal, and he is essentially a war criminal now. I believe that's how it happened.
Yes, I think the other, as well as when the incident happens, is kind of on the last day of the war. His drive is to go out there and kind of get one last kill, I think. And he's so desperate to do that he kind of ignores orders, I think, as well. And goes beyond what he's kind of been instructed. So I think that also the war criminal thing, and the fact that it's the last day of the war, and the fact that he's ignored orders, I think is much of the reason what happens to him next.
You're right. I had not thought about it. I forgot the detail that it was just about over. I think that's also the part where he's chasing that last plane that you realize he would probably die just to get this last kill, because they're in like a really intense dogfight, and they're circling around each other basically until one of them is getting low on fuel and he ends up on top. And I'm pretty sure he just accepted he would die for it. And he does. He almost does. He ends up falling into I don't know if it's a sea or a lake. I think it's probably a sea, but and he's essentially would have died, I assume, if no one would have found it. But yeah, that's where you see his commitment to his kill count, really.
Yeah, his commitment to his kill count. Can we talk about kind of the dogfights in the as depicted in the art? Because I really enjoyed the way they're kind of, it's not an easy thing to do, is to kind of depict planes flying and kind of fighting each other. It can be quite a tricky thing to do, and I think the artist done an exceptional job of kind of depicting the action. It's almost always really clear what's going on, kind of, and you get a real visceral kind of the art's kind of impactful, and kind of when a shot lands or when a plane's going down, and
it looks like
all that sort of thing.
It has meaning. Yeah, it's very nice. I love the layouts, the panel layouts during the dogfights, because all the borders get kind of slanted. Everything gets kind of you kind of shove the panels together onto the page, because it's also fast and it reads fast. It reads quickly, but the art is, it's insane. And the way he does smoke, I loved the way he did smoke. The trailing
the
paint.
chemtrails, and
that was awesome.
Yeah.
The art through the whole thing was amazing, but particularly, I think my favorite part, excluding the last chapter, is the Korea chapter, just because the dogfights are so interesting to look at.
Yeah, the dogfights are really well shown, and it's kind of the art is sort of cartoonish, but the airplanes, there's lots of detail on them, and it looks fairly realistic. So there's that nice bit of contrast there as well, I thought.
Yeah, I definitely agree. His almost everything except for the figures are super highly detailed. Even his clothes, his goggles, you can see the stitching on his goggles a lot of the time, but you can't see but he'll have 5 lines on his face, but his goggles will have 1,000.
The coloring does a lot of heavy lifting and kind of bringing definition to the characters.
Definitely. I think he honestly, he's either equal or he's a better colorist than he is at the line art. I love the colors in this. They're very expressive. They take a lot of tone shifts. There's a scene near the end of the Korea chapter where lightning flashes, and it's him in the dark, and then his face lit up very bright, and then him in the dark again. And I thought that worked really well. I hadn't seen a lot of stuff done like that in comics.
Yeah, he's it's really, it's an interesting art style.
I can't compare it to anything.
Kind of makes it interesting. No, can't think of many artists that would kind of use this sort of style. Really, it's not it's almost kind of his own. It is. I don't think it's art that you necessarily would see in an adult's graphic novel. It is. You can kind of tell that he's a children's illustrator.
Yeah,
especially when he's kind of draw the faces.
Yeah, it's very true. I hadn't thought about that, but it is. It's very distinct. I'll say that. Wesley Robbins has something that I have not seen in his art before.
Yeah.
So after he does the Korea thing, I'll just keep trucking, because each individual chapter kind of has its own themes and style.
Yeah.
Maybe I was wrong. The art in this chapter is so good too. I don't know exactly where this is happening. So he gets court-martialed and is sent to like the Arctic Circle, high above the Arctic Circle.
Yes.
So it's constantly freezing and snowing, and he's basically just there to be there. He has to fly and do some tasks, but essentially he's just there as a prisoner.
Yes.
He plans to live there till he dies, and most people die pretty quickly from the cold and such. But he refuses to die. And the widow moves up there with him. They have 2 kids, I believe. And the whole time he's up there, he's paying attention to the news about these fighter pilots. And then everyone's attention shifts to the space race to be the first country to land on the moon. And so his attention shifts there too. After what kind of plane is it that he gets in a dogfight up in the Arctic Circle?
I think he's still flying a MiG, isn't he?
I believe so. I think he's basically in the same plane.
Yeah, it's the same sort of plane. And while he's out in the kind of Arctic Circle, there's a really kind of a heartbreak scene of him walking in from the cold, and he's just looking at the hovel that he's living in, and you can just kind of tell that he's almost dead inside.
Yeah.
He's just looking at his family, and he's just like, oh man.
God, that was depressing.
What is it? Yeah, and kind of
he has a drink at the bar, goes home in the snow, and just that was...
Yeah, kind of...
He literally falls into a snowbank, and his wife sees him through the window, and he says, "Let me die." I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, because he wants to be out there shooting down American warplanes, and not kind of stuck up here.
Yeah, very true. I don't have a lot to say about this chapter, but besides like the story, but I mean, it's kind of just more of the same. It's very compelling, but not my favorite chapter. So do you have anything that stood out to you?
Kind of like the key incident in the chapter is where he undertakes this daring act of... So he's always it's kind of in this chapter which shows that not enough for him to kind of just do the minimum. He has to kind of take extra risks. So him and his squadron take on a plane, and they go way too far out of range, and manages to shoot the plane down, but his squadron mate is out of fuel. Instead of just letting the guy drop into the ocean, he kind of carries him on the... And I'm not too sure how realistic that is, him kind of using his plane to stunt another plane all the way back till they're able to refuel. But I'm assuming since Jed's got a background in aviation, he wouldn't have just pulled that out of his rear end, especially considering some of his other writing, which is very research heavy and kind of focuses a lot on procedures and details. But that's the other things that he could have just flown home. He didn't have to try and rescue his mates. That kind of also comes back into why he's selected for the mission later on.
Yeah, actually, that was a pretty eye-opening scene, because I wasn't sure how much he cared. Like, obviously, he has a heart. I wasn't sure if he was willing to risk his own life to save that guy or not. And obviously he was. It was very eye-opening for the character. And I did wonder about that part where he pushed the plane, but the rest of it had been so consistently realistic that I was like, well, it must be a thing, because he hasn't messed up anything.
Yeah, I'm assuming that is also Jed Mercurio, his medical dramas, kind of, what he first got his break in EV with, were so well regarded because they actually focused on the realistic procedural details of what happens in an A&E room, what happens in an operating theatre. And Line of Duty, for example, is one of the best police procedurals out there at the moment. And the reason why that's so well regarded is the way he does the interview scenes. And he does the interview scenes the way a normal police interview in the UK is conducted. So it's not like something out of SVU where people like banging their hands on the table and saying, we're going to be doing this to you. It's all kind of very calm. And it's just the two, the interviewer trying to set a trap for the person that they're interviewing. And so that's why I'm assuming that one bit where he's carrying the other plane must be based in reality, because I can't imagine him making something like that up. Really, yeah.
Yeah, I would have to think so. I'm not as familiar with Mercurio's other work, but from what you're saying, it sounds like the guy knows what he's talking about pretty much no matter what he's talking about.
Yeah, he does a lot of research.
And there's nothing else in here to make me think otherwise. It was actually weird how compelling I was flipping through this thing like crazy, like too fast, honestly.
Yeah.
And the jargon, all the stuff I didn't know, it kind of just like slid right by me until I learned it. Because there'd be a lot of stuff like, I didn't know the names of the planes. They had a certain name for their pilots. There was a bunch of stuff. They kept saying the guns were black. It took me till like the second or third time to realize, that means they just were in a dogfight. But obviously that one seemed obvious. But he makes you kind of learn these terms for whatever it is he's talking about, which is nice.
you just think, oh, what's he referring to? But then it's kind of you learn through the context in which he's using and what certain words mean. That is a bit of an issue later on in the book where he's kind of in the spacecraft. He's referring to kind of like lots of different pieces of equipment. I had to Google a couple of them because of what the hell is he talking about there? Because it wasn't kind of like, the three letter acronyms he was using weren't clear of the kind of equipment that he was actually using.
Yeah, it got pretty complicated towards the end there. So after, I guess, the Arctic Circle, towards the end of that, because he rescued his teammate there and blew up that other plane, he is selected to, I guess, be the first man on the moon and beat the Apollo 11 mission. They want to beat it, it was a space race. They were just trying to get there first. And this is more of I don't want to say half-assed, but it is not the Apollo mission. It's one man. I can't recall the exact specifics as to why it's just him.
All the way through the book, they make reference to American pilots, and they make reference to the fact that Armstrong and the other astronauts that kind of made it into space were also in Korean War. And I think the reason why he was selected to go up there by himself, because the Russians kind of knew that the mission was hopeless. So I think they had to lose.
70 kilos.
Yeah, 70 kilos. So that means they couldn't have a co-pilot there. They just kind of, no, there's no person alive that can actually do all the things that are required by themselves. And if we make it a public display and it fails, then it's going to be a big egg on our face. So they just, send one person up there to kind of see what happens.
So yet again, he's going to do something incredibly dangerous and brave and get absolutely no credit.
Yeah. Yes.
Story of his life. And there's the scene, this is the last scene with his family, and he gets the news that he's been selected to be on this solo mission, and it's so the whole time, the dialogue in this is sparse, I'd say, for the most of it, but between his wife and him, it's what's the matter, and they've got a mission for me, and then he's gone. Yes. And then I think he kisses his kids goodnight, and he just leaves. That stood out to me because, you obviously knew his priorities before, but now you can really tell, even with this established family, and I guess it's not a great life, but it's a life. He just goes straight for the solo mission to the moon. Yes. And that was interesting.
He's desperate for glory, desperate to get out of, the Arctic Circle, wherever it is he's based. So, he probably knows it's suicide mission, but he has to try. He's got to try. He can't stay there.
Definitely. I think it's like he knows this is his last shot at this. Like, this is his last shot at what he really wants, which is to have his name known, basically.
Yes.
Which
sorry to cut across you. So the story kind of posits an alternate history or secret history where a Russian person was the first person on the moon. But I think like a week or so, whatever it was, and it can kind of decide for yourself whether you think his mission is successful or not. But
it is. It's a very open ending, I think. I was surprised how much this last chapter, it's called The Earth and the Moon, and it starts in 1969, which for anyone that's following this alternate history, I thought it was very long. It took probably a quarter of the book, it's the longest chapter, I think, maybe besides Korea. And
yes, I think in the original novel, this space bit was most of the book, from what I understand. And then like the bits in Korea and the Arctic Circle were intercut with his actual fight for survival in outer space.
I'd be interested in reading a bit of the book because, from my understanding, Jed Mercurio is the one who actually adapted this. Like, he had adapted his own book into this dialogue. So he chose to make it this sparse. So I haven't looked, but the book, I can't imagine the book is too terribly wordy. And if it is, after this, it would seem like a waste of words, because this does a lot with nothing.
One of the reasons for that is that apparently in the novel, a lot of it is technical descriptions of what he's doing in the spacecraft. So it's kind of like, I am now going to be pressing this this button here to do the calculation to find out where I am going. Oh no, I have to do this other thing kind of now. Maybe not in the tone of voice I just said, but kind of it is a lot of technical descriptions apparently. I was in the Guardian's list of 1,000 books you need to read before you die.
Oh, wow.
So it must be can't be that bad a novel, especially it's being kind of adapted into a graphic novel as well. There must be kind of sufficient demand to see the story told in multiple formats.
Yeah, I think it'd be probably a pretty engaging book if this has anything to say.
Yeah.
Plus, in this you can kind of show don't tell, but on a prose page, maybe that kind of long descriptive stuff makes it a little bit more tense. You know, you can feel that he's out there one man alone. But in this, obviously, you can see that on the page. So that kind of stuff doesn't need to happen. So essentially, he goes on this mission. He basically has to adjust a bit and realizes all of his controls go out. First off, he's got not a lot of power and I don't think a lot of air. And it's either he can turn around now and kind of like go around the moon and come back home, or he can go to the moon, but he will not be able to leave and he will die on the moon.
Yes.
And no one's going to know he was there.
Yes.
So this is kind of, and he decides, spoiler alert, he decides to walk on the moon. And that's the first time in the whole book where he doesn't really care about other people knowing, right?
Yeah.
Because that was a big change.
Yeah. A lot of, so there's one line in the book, I've got it open now, where it says, but the destiny of Ivan the Terrible must be a mission beyond the ambition of all other men. He himself will know that I was the first person. And, you know, at some point in the future, they're going to discover my body and they're going to realize that, I was the first man on the moon. Doesn't matter if no one else knows about it now.
Mm-hmm.
I will know that I did it. I will know I did it. I proved it to myself. You know, throughout the entire thing, after his power goes out and he loses water and he loses energy, he's got no computers. He's having to do all the calculations
by hand.
He gets like a cut in his spacesuit as well. So everything that could go wrong does go wrong. And he's just, you know, that was me in his situation. I'd be broken and crying down, just like waiting for death. But he's just kind of so bloody minded, so stubborn that he's going to push on ahead with the mission. And he's got an opportunity to go home and be with his family and, you know, have a life with them, but that's not what he wants. He wants glory. Yeah,
that's pretty much all. He'd rather have glory in death than, I guess, go home without it, which is very interesting. And it's fun that this is the kind of alternate history that could be formatted in a way where it's like, oh no, this happened. We just obviously would never have known. I like that because it doesn't directly change like the whole future. Like this could have happened. I mean, obviously we would have found the body or something, but it's not the kind of history where like you go back and kill Hitler and everything's different. It's like very subtle.
Yes.
I thought it was very, 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 very good. It was so tense at the end though.
Yeah, it really was. Kind of each little I was reading each kind of caption box. Okay, now what terrible that bit where he has to kind of drink his own urine.
That got to me too.
In the space station, the International Space Station, apparently there are two different water supplies because the Russians actually won't drink their own urine, whereas kind of the astronauts, cosmonauts from the other nations will drink their own kind of recycled urine. So that's kind of, you know, shows kind of maybe how desperate he was to kind of get some sustenance. That is. Right
after that, he cries a little bit, and then he drinks the tears before they freeze on his face.
Yeah. Oh, mate, what a poetic image that is. Yeah. Kind of like. Yeah.
And all the panels are there. The layouts get more and more dense. Like he's filling the page with tiny panels. I think this page has like 16 panels on it.
Yeah.
Everything's happening all at once and it overwhelms you like it should, like it's overwhelming him. But it's also very scenic. Like when the panels do enlarge and you get room to breathe, it's very beautiful. And it looks way different than the rest of the book.
Yeah.
The use of black is stark. It is very easy to tell that this is in a completely different setting, which it should be. It should be alien.
Yes, I agree. So I've watched a few sci-fi films recently, kind of completely unrelated to this. There's a film I watched called Ad Astra. Don't know if you've heard of it.
I've not, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, so he's So kind of, it's a similar sort of use of like base imagery to kind of how small and insignificant one man can be in the universe, and really his actions here don't matter that much, but for him they're important, and that's kind of one of the strong themes in the book, is he's going to do what's important for him, even if it's utterly self-destructive.
It doesn't seem like any outside, he gets told to do sometimes, but the majority of the time he's just kind of doing what's best for him, except for being imprisoned, obviously. But there's not a lot of outside influence on he doesn't let anyone change his mind, basically.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
He's in prison for, I assume that would have been, his kids were like older, like close to 10 years. I didn't count.
I think he's been there for a while, yeah.
And the whole time, he's just thinking about what he was thinking about when he was in the plane. He just wants glory.
Yeah.
And the moment he gets the chance, he jumps at it. He's got a one-track mind, I think.
Yes.
And because of that, you're never really aware how capable he is. Like at the end, he's like doing these calculations by hand. And I was like, I never knew he could do that, because all he ever wants to do is kill people.
Yeah. Well, kind of one of the things you do have to be if you're a fighter jet pilot is have really good math skills for some reason.
Yeah.
Kind of, I do know that, but he's making all these calculations, and without any computers or anything, it's
that reminds
me
of
go ahead.
No, I'll find it. You go ahead. I need to find a page.
I just wanted to kind of take it back to what you're saying, kind of how the artist uses the panels to kind of ramp up the attention, speed everything along, especially in some of the space sections or the fighter pilot stations, but then he'll break it down again into much larger panels to kind of slow the story. It's a very interestingly, expertly paced book in that regard.
I would definitely agree. When I first was getting into it, I was confused by the pace during the first chapter and stuff, because I had a very rough idea of what it was going to be fully about. And I was like, we're spending a lot of time in this Korean War. I thought we were going to go to the moon or something. But by the end, I was like, wow, that was both incredibly quick, and I feel like I got that guy's whole life. But that also kind of made me sad, because I was like, if that was that guy's whole life, he didn't do a lot. I mean, he did a lot, but it was not a lot of eventful stuff, which I think might kind of be part of it. Like, it wasn't the life, the average person would dream of, but it was for him.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say that, because like he was the top, fighter pilot in Korea. He rescued his teammate in the Arctic, and apparently he was the first man on the moon as well. But you do feel kind of like this is a man whose life was unfulfilled potential, if that makes sense. Kind of like if he hadn't been sent to the Arctic Circle, he could have done like so much more. And
especially to the outside world.
Yes.
They don't even think he did anything, because they don't know about any of this stuff.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
The line I was looking for before is, you mentioned he was doing the calculations, and you said something about a pen. And there's a line in here about how the Russians could possibly have kept up with the American space program. And one guy says, they spent millions of dollars designing a pen that could work in space. What did we do? And the guy said, we used pencils. That was one of my favorite lines of that.
Yeah.
They're just working with what they got. They're not getting fancy.
Yeah, it's kind of...
Which is pretty much the whole book is like, we're just going to do what we can do.
With what we've got, yeah. Yeah. Looking through the art. So the book kind of ends with him stepping out onto the surface of the moon, and him taking his... You don't actually even get to see his first steps on the moon. There's no kind of like triumphant moment of him kind of standing on the surface of the moon. You just see his foot stepping down from the lunar module. Then the last couple of pages are describing what happens to his family, and kind of his wife and his children being told that you can never mention your father's name again. Then in time the children forgot their father. Occasionally they would recall a ghost, gaze up on the moon, not understanding why. And it's just kind of like he's been the one thing that he didn't want to happen is actually happened. He wanted that recognition, that glory, and like now no one knows he kind of basically ever existed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of...
I can't tell if it's partly triumphant at the end or if it's just sad. Part of me feels like it was triumphant for him, but as the reader, we might be the only ones that feel that way.
I think it's triumphant to him. If we actually look what happened, so the Russian nation didn't really lose out on anything because it's a well-run mission. He kind of got to do what he wanted, which was be something extraordinary. And his family are out of that hellhole in the Arctic Circle. It's sad because he's not getting the recognition that he deserved, and it does feel like he could have achieved a lot more of what he had. I mean, you just get the feeling there's always that comparison going through the book of what he's done compared to guys like the fighter pilots that they mentioned, the American fighter pilots. So if you just think, if this guy was born in the United States, what could he have done?
Oh yeah,
really? Yeah, it's just kind of almost a damning.
Or just anywhere in better circumstances,
yes,
basically.
Kind of.
If he wasn't forced to almost kill that kid when he was like 10.
Yeah. What could he have done? Just that few of us, has not nearly killed a child when they were 11 years old. It's
exactly.
It is kind of almost a damning indictment of the Soviet system in a lot of ways, who are kind of forcing some of their best people into these horrendous situations.
Since we went through the whole plot, do you have any outstanding themes? Because obviously we talked about a bunch of different ideas, but at the end of this, did you leave with any certain feeling towards it? What do you think it was about? Because I was struggling for a bit. I think I might have a little grasp on it now, but I'm not sure.
I think I wouldn't say it's a character study because you don't really, like you said, you don't actually get to understand much of his inner working. A lot of what we learn about him is through his actions, which is, show, don't tell. But I think the strongest themes is, in order to kind of risk to achieve great things, you have to be really stubborn and bloody minded and not take no for an answer, even if that is ultimately self-destructive. I think that is one of the really strongest themes running through the book, because you might try your best, you might have all the skills to do it, but you all might fail or something. One of the strong themes running through the book. I mean, I don't know, what did you think?
I kind of had a similar thing. I think I thought about it differently, but when hearing you say it, it sounds similar. I thought it was kind of about a sense of duty, but in the opposite of what you'd expect from a more military thing. It's a duty to oneself.
Yes.
To do what they want to do, because he's a soldier essentially the whole time. But he never feels like a soldier. You're not getting panels of him being yelled at by commanding officers. He still is doing things to accomplish his own goal.
Yeah, I think that's really
a sense of duty to oneself.
Yeah. So,
but also there's something I'm missing. I just feel like there's some big thematic message screaming at me that I'm not getting yet. I might have to reread it.
Yeah. I think what you said there is really true, because earlier on in the Korean sections, you see there's quite a few scenes where the pilots, they come back from a successful mission and they're in a pub or a bar on the base, and you can see all the rest of his squad are kind of laughing, and he's always a little bit apart from that. It's kind of like how your own desires can also leave you isolated as well. I don't think he ever really gave himself over to his family. The only thing that he really felt free in is when he was in the air or flying out to try and achieve his own goals. So yeah, I know what you mean. There's something that I can't quite put my on either in terms of what was this book actually about. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot to it. I think it's a pretty personal tale too, and for me, it was about reading about a guy that was very, very different from me. So it was kind of difficult, but that made it even more enjoyable, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Well,
anything else you'd like to add? I think we covered a lot here.
Yeah, we covered a lot. My one this is kind of a jokey thing to say, but my one hope is that any range of people reading this book might not add to the already ridiculous moon landing conspiracies. We never landed there as the Russians got there first, but yeah, that's the only thing I'd add, and that's just
that'd be a lot cooler than just no one got there at all, which is the main conspiracy, right?
I mean, it's just ridiculous conspirity theories. If the Americans never got there, don't you think the first people to call them out on it would have been the Russians? Would have been the Russians. Yeah. You're bullshitting, man. We've got satellites up there, dude. We can tell if you've landed on there.
Exactly.
It's just
exactly.
It's just dumb.
Oh man, I want to read books about conspiracies now. Maybe we'll do.
Yes.
I do love a good alternate history book, though. This was really, really cool.
Yeah.
Very unique. I can't think of anything on my shelf that looks or reads like it at all.
Neither can I, actually, no.
Just because it's one of the only adaptations I have where the actual novelist adapted it himself, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, that's the other quick point I wanted to raise. A lot of the graphic novel adaptations that I've read have been not that good. I think the only adaptation that I think is that I've read recently that's kind of been on this level is Speak. And again, that was adapted by the author. A lot of graphic. I'm thinking specifically of the Discworld ones, which weren't great adaptations. Yeah, and you just get kind of hokey ones, that kind of cash grabs. But this was really well done.
Yeah,
it was really well done.
I think the key to adaptations is you shouldn't adapt it if there's nothing to say in that new medium.
Yes.
This would have been very different as a book, and I think there was probably you could do something different with the medium. But in the case of a lot of adaptations, you might as well just stick with the original material, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Very true.
Awesome. Well, we'll settle on something for next time, and then hopefully we can do that here soon.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, man. If you're still listening, guys, do check out Line of Duty. It is one of the best TV shows. Police procedurals, that's currently being made. Especially check out the.
I haven't checked it out.
Check it out. It's really, really good. Really thrilling. Really thrilling.
Need to try that. I honestly I don't think I'd even heard of it before this.
It's kind of I think it's one of those shows that's really big in the UK, but nowhere else. I don't think it traveled a lot for whatever reason.
Interesting, because we get a lot. You guys make the best shows over there, and we get a lot of it, but no one talks about that.
Yeah, Line of Duty, if you can find it. It should be on like BBC America.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for listening, guys. Thank you very much, Fahad, for your time. It's been really fun.
Thank you, dude. Stay safe out there. Stay home.
Stay safe, guys. Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Bye.